Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good morning, depending on where you're located. Welcome to this Thrive presentation today. I'm Dynamics 365 MVP Rick McCutcheon, and I'll be hosting this session, and we've got a great session for you. So it's 3:01 right now, Eastern time. I'm going to hold on to about 3:03, and I'll let you stare at these gentlemen for a couple of minutes, and then we will kick things off with a great agenda. So we'll be back to you in about 120 seconds.
This is where we should have prepared some jokes or something for each other.
As well, if you have any questions, just put them into the chat and we'll try, if we see something that we should answer right away, we'll answer the question. If not, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Okay, let's get things rolling. So 2020 has forced a lot of organizations to rapidly embrace digital transformation across all industries and verticals. While this may have initially been a survival response, many organizations are thriving due to the new and improved processes across sales, customer services, marketing, and just about every process within a business. This strategic session is designed for us to take stock of digital transformation that has taken place over the past 12 months and hopefully to take learnings from the organizations that are implementing and driving this transformation globally. Now, I've done quite a few sessions over the last few months on this subject, and I've got to tell you that, we learned a lot last year. A lot has really changed, but I think the world of technology is moving much faster than it ever has before, and I think 2021 is really going to be a breakneck speed world of digital transformation. So let's get going. I'm going to first introduce our keynote speaker, His Excellency, Ambassador of Ireland to Canada, Dr. Eamon McKee. Dr. McKee will be delivering our initial keynote. He has a very impressive CV with roles including UN Director and Director of Conflict Resolution Unit and the Director General Trade Division. He's also played a key role in the Northern Ireland peace process as a member of the Irish government's talk team that negotiated the Good Friday Agreement and was later involved in implementing it on the policing and justice agenda. So I want to welcome Dr. McKee, and I'll send things over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Delighted to be here. Hello to my fellow panel members and to everybody who's joined us here. I'd like to thank Enterprise Ireland for setting this up and for the representatives from CRM Software and Solgari as well. It's really interesting because these names all mean something to me. As part of my job as Director General for Trade, I brought in CRM. We picked actually 365 for our department, and we've been bringing in CRM and rolling it out to our mission network. We've almost 100 embassies, and we've got the department itself, of course. It was really, for us and for me, an imperative to do this, to have what we call SEMS, our contact and event management system. And CRM proved to be, and 365 proved to be hugely adaptable. We needed to tailor it to our system, which is not on the cloud. Traditionally, our contacts were kept in a top drawer by the ambassador secretary on pieces of paper, usually the St. Patrick's Day guest list, or on Excel spreadsheets. We have no idea who our contacts are or how to manage them or how to create heat maps and so on. This is going to be transformative, and I know for an awful lot of organizations this is old hat, but for us it's really quite revolutionary. And so, like I say, this is kind of familiar territory for me, but it also speaks to the power of the digital revolution. I will say that coming to Canada, I came in September. I'm one of a generation of diplomats that are COVID diplomats, and we are a much benighted generation because we haven't been able to meet people. And the stuff of my trade is actually receptions and dinners, lunches, meetings, and contacts. And we just simply haven't been able to do that. Haven't really been able to travel outside Ottawa. And I feel almost as if this year is, next September is going to be year one rather than year two, once we can get going. But like all our missions around the world, we've had to pivot very quickly as of March of last year. And instead of doing those meetings, we've moved on to digital platforms. And yesterday I checked with our ICT people, and they told me that between July and December, my department hosted 10,000 virtual meetings. That's absolutely unheard of. I'm really keen to find out what the statistics are for the previous year. But you could probably double that for the whole year. That absolute transformation of the way we've been doing business. We've had to do the same with our outreach here in Canada. So since September, I've been doing webinars and outreach. And it does have an advantage. You certainly lose the human contact, but the advantage is that you can reach people in time and space. There are people who have participated in our events who would never have come simply because they're not near Toronto or Ottawa or Calgary, Vancouver. They wouldn't have been involved. But because we're putting them out on a digital platform, people can actually have me and my colleagues in their living rooms, and that's been good. We also record them so people can actually catch up with these sessions. So I think this technology is here to stay, but the future will be a hybrid. We will get back to one-on-one meetings and conferences and events, and that'll be a very good thing. But this way of communicating, I think, is here to stay. If I was to say lessons learned, we've had to make this up pretty quickly. And the feedback that we got from all of our missions around the world, and we did a session together in December. Very common feedback was that we need to professionalize. That in delivering content, it has to be relevant, it has to be time efficient, but it has to look good too. And when I say that, I've got a renewed admiration for television, because lighting, positioning, seating, presentation, the whole look actually is a real skill. And a lot of our productions they're a bit handmade looking, and I think if we're going to use digital platforms, it's about a very professional approach and a very targeted approach, because people can get tired of them very quickly. But it is, for diplomacy, a huge revolution. Some broader thoughts, I think, when we look back on the year, one is that, clearly COVID has been a crisis for our health services right across the world. But there are interesting commonalities. If you look at, Bloomberg did a resilience rank ordering in December. Ireland was 11th, Canada was a very impressive 15th, the United States was 37th. And these are just countries with a decent GDP. But the countries who have been the most successful were the ones which were democratic, which had invested in their health services, in which the public had trusted the authorities, and in which there wasn't a huge gap in terms of equality. I think the other lesson we can draw from COVID is that we will have more government. That from the period of the 1970s onwards, we've had a neoliberal approach where governments have got smaller, services have been privatized, retrenchment and fiscal rectitude have meant that government services are being a bit attenuated. I think now COVID and other challenges that will come associated with climate change will mean that there has to be more government. And we have to be careful here, because clearly the recent decades that we have seen have been transformational in terms of the digital revolution. And I think, as Rick was saying in earlier remarks, the change is phenomenal. We haven't even anticipated what the real change can be when we bring in now 5G and later 6G. These will absolutely transform how we live our lives. So we've got a taste of that, because COVID is an accelerant. The other point I would make is that you might be able to see, I've got 2 computers, 2 phones, God knows how many WhatsApp groups. I get emails. In the last few months, I've had 5,500 external emails. That's just from people outside the department, and internal emails are a multiple of that. and I'm dodging between this, that, and the other, and all kinds of platforms. And I only wish I had Solgari. I got to tell you, this is my next fight with my head of ICT, because we're not on the cloud. I would love to have an integrated system where it's all on one screen, because it is actually difficult to manage, and you need to put these together. And I know that's what Solgari does, and does it very well. So, and this is what this presentation about. In Ireland, we've got a really good ecosystem in terms of technology and innovation. And Solgari has come out of that ecosystem. We're particularly good, I think, at the client interface. You know, Irish people tend to be very empathetic. We're very sociable. And I think we have an intuitive sense of what works for the public and for customers as well. So I'm really happy to be part of this, and to encourage people to have a good look at Solgari and the kind of platform that we've created with Microsoft and CRM. In terms of Ireland, I'll probably end on this. I think if you go to Ireland, and you know, the one impact of COVID is the lack of travel. And when we talk to our state agencies like Enterprise Ireland that support our Indigenous companies, or IDA, which bring in the FDI companies, going to Ireland is always where you seal the deal. Because when you go to Ireland, there's a huge energy and dynamism in this system. We've very firmly got our eyes on the future. Now, there are other countries, United States, United Kingdom, Russia, China, that to me look like they're looking to the past. I think Ireland, Canada, the European Union are looking to the future, and that's what we're doing. We're very attentive to business, and we understand that the three things that business look for are infrastructure, innovation, and talent. And, you know, we're sometimes criticized for our corporate tax, but an awful lot of the companies, FDI companies that come to Ireland, and it's a hoary old cliche, but it happens to be true, they come for the tax, but they stay for the talent. And we find that new investment, 70% of new FDI investment in Ireland is coming from existing companies because they're happy to be there. So Ireland is a really dynamic country. We've got, under Science Foundation Ireland, we have a great interface between government, universities, and the private sector. We've, I think, 18 centres of excellence focused on different forms of technology. And you can see that while we rely very heavily on our FDI base, the FDI base has actually been very catalytic for Irish companies. So you find now that we've got Irish companies in pharma, which is a major sector for us, in ICT, in dynamic currency exchange, and in the kind of services that Solgari provide. So that's a kind of a quick overview, a snapshot from my perspective. I think that relations between Ireland and Canada are going from strength to strength. We've got CETA now, which hopefully we'll ratify. I think we've got some really great Canadian companies in Ireland. We're hoping to get some more there. Ireland will probably post one of the best economic performances, even with COVID, because of the sectors that we're in. Pharma, medtech, ICT, financial services, all of which badly needed in COVID, and which in a way are the future, you know. So I'll leave it at that. Very happy to join the discussion and to take any questions. So thanks very much, and back to you, Rick.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McKee. You know, welcome to Canada. And you didn't even mention the great golf courses and pubs over in Ireland, you know, which were a big highlight for me. So I'm going to send it over to Desmond Nair, the General Manager for Dynamics in Canada, and he can tell us all sorts of wonderful things that Microsoft's doing, and how this digital transformation is, you know, kind of really being led by Microsoft up there in the infrastructure of, you know, many organizations, including Enterprise Ireland. So Desmond, over to you.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Dr. McKee, and the rest of the panel as well. It's a pleasure to be really excited to talk to you about some of the things we're doing at Microsoft at a very high level. I've titled my session around the theme of resilience and being able to thrive in the face of change. And it really comes from the fact of, when you look back over the last 12 months, we've seen our organizations, big and small, have been impacted, you know, whether it be because of supply chain disruptions, consumer spend dropping, and a whole bunch of things. We've seen organizations that have been able to tackle the ambiguity and unpredictability by leaning on something which we've called digital resilience, and think of it in the form of technology, digital technology, that has helped them adapt and thrive. And this concept of resilience that we've seen organizations take up are really looked at from two perspectives. And it's important that we see this. The one being, hey, how is it going to help me respond to the crisis? But the more important one being, how does it help me bounce back to recover and reimagine my business in the post-crisis era? And so if we go to the next slide, I think that there is no question that the crisis has acted as a catalyst for transformation. In fact, Boston Consulting Group, when they did their research somewhere midway through last year, said up to 80% of business leaders were looking to accelerate their digital transformation. And in fact, those that had made investment in digital transformation, 70% were going to spend even more as they saw the benefit of it in terms of helping with this digital resilience. And if done right, digital transformation will help build long-term resilience, increase speed to market, help with workforce productivity and stability. But I think quite important, especially for organizations that are going through this current transition, is help with short-term financial gains. And in fact, the figures that were quoted by Boston Consulting Group are anywhere from the range of 12 to 20% with up to 50% profit margins in the first year with companies that have gone down the road of digitally transforming. And so let's go to the next slide, please. And so at Microsoft, we looked at how we could help customers navigate these three phases we believe all businesses will go through in terms of this crisis. A lot of businesses are now in phase 3 already, but there's still many that I see and we talk to daily that are still in phase 1 and 2. With phase 1 being, how do I keep my lights on by remote everything? And we'll talk a little bit about what Microsoft's doing in this stage. But it comes down to ensuring employee stay productive and ensuring that as a business, we stay connected with our customers, whether it be for sales, whether it be for servicing customers, is just be able to keep the business going. Phase 2 was really about how do I see, what does recovery look like for my business? Business models, products, and services will potentially need to be adapted based on uncertainty in demand and supply. How does my business deal with changes that are potentially going to occur in the labor markets and credit availability? And then phase 3 is about what does the world look like coming out of the crisis? How do I reimagine my business in the future? How do I realize new opportunities, new scenarios, and focus on growth going into the future? And so these three phases have been what we've been kind of looking at and at customers as they traverse the crisis, if I can call it that, and continue to do so and help them through these different means. And if I go to the next slide, at Microsoft, we had to respond too. And in fact, our CEO has a really good statement where he says, we've seen 2 years of digital transformation in literally 2 months, right? And so for a technology vendor, this is amazing, because a lot of the discussions that we've been having with customers, and customers have typically put this on the back burner saying, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, are now super important for customers to stay alive. And so as Microsoft, we had to respond and help customers navigate the journey towards digital transformation. And so from a solution standpoint, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. Probably the most important one was that as part of recovery, how do I ensure my team can continue working? And it's probably no surprise here that technologies like the one we're using and the one Microsoft has called Microsoft Teams were able to help customers meet and collaborate remotely, engage with virtual events such as the one we're having, but also, and probably more importantly, allow for remote learning, right? Students, teachers, breakout classrooms. It was even internally within Microsoft, I think what the crisis has done is sped up research and development to the stage where we're now looking into remote technology and how it affects people's fatigue level. And so coming up with things that will actually help you in terms of the amount of time you spend behind screen. And what's important, and I think Dr. McKee pointed out to it, was many of us have many different platforms and devices. And so one of the challenges I think customers of ours faced is that not everyone at home had technology that they could run their office applications on. And by office, I mean your physical office. And so we allowed them to use this virtual technology that essentially said, well, no matter what you have, whether it be iOS or Android or Windows, you'll be able to bring everything you had in your office onto that device and be able to run it. And we call that technology Windows Virtual Desktop. But at the same time, while we're enabling people to stay alive and run your business and have your employees productive, you also need to make money as a business. And so we looked at how we could take some of the technology, and I'm sure we're going to get into a lot more of this discussion as we go. How do you continue to market to customers? How do you continue to sell? How do you continue to service your products and services? And so our technology called Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement really allows you to provide sales and services capability remotely, allowing customers to provide customer service, whether it be over the internet, for customers that need mission critical and absolutely need someone to be on site. You know, for emergency response services, as an example, we allow that through technology like field services, and of course, adding voice, video, and chat with technologies like Solgari that bring that to bear was super important for us. The other element was, how do you take a business that typically sold through a brick and mortar shop to contactless shopping? And so we've had a number of customers go live with technology such as Dynamics 365 Commerce, enabling online shopping within days. We've had customers that essentially were going to go into financial rescue and said, how do I reimagine my business for this current period or going beyond? And we were able to convert them within a matter of 4 weeks to become e-enabled and e-transacting. And I'm happy to say that when you look at data for December, and I'm just looking at 1 month, we've seen 30 million transactions go through this D365 commerce technology just in 1 month within the country, and that's super impressive. And so what the other thing we've done is added supply chain technology. And supply chain is super important. And I talked about the unpredictability of suppliers, because you've got suppliers who don't get their inventory, and so it has a knock-on effect with you as a business. And so recently we announced a case study with a customer that essentially does home deliveries for pre-prepared meals. You'd have to take the ingredients and obviously put it all together. But they use the Microsoft Dynamics supply chain technology that now allows them to deal with a myriad of suppliers, but essentially get the goods on time that they need. And so if a supplier ran out of stock, it very easily swaps to a supplier that will be able to add that. And probably another point I wanted to add here was, with businesses going into the e-commerce area, a lot of them don't understand the world of security, especially in the area of e-commerce. And so it was super important for us to bring that level of support to organizations as well by adding things like fraud protection and purchase protection. You'd be super surprised at how people would use the ability to buy things on discount, return it at a different time, and get back the price that it currently exists at that time. And so those kinds of methods of frauds were super important for that situation. And then the last part, which I'll leave on, was bringing in virtual. And virtual is really amazing technology. When you need an assistant to be able to service your customers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we've got virtual agents that can take care of that. Basically, it's part of Dynamics 365. You point it to a data source, or you point it to a system, and it would be able to answer questions on behalf of you to your customers. Today, we have a number of retailers in Canada who are using this for responding to their customers, but also, as importantly, for doing things like curbside pickup. So when you get to the place where you park your car and you say, I'm here, the virtual agent lets people know that you're at your car. And in fact, if it could, would probably even bring the goods to your car. But unfortunately, we need humans to do that. And so it still relies on that part, but it's virtually driven. And I think, the last part on virtual was, we've had customers who were unfortunately not able to move to e-commerce as quickly as they would want. And so they've used remote assist technology, which was actually built to help you support people remotely to start doing remote sales. And so you'd have the shopkeeper, if I can call it that, take a customer who's remotely connecting to them via remote assist technology and walk through the aisles of the shop and get you to pick goods. And for a small business, that was a super solution that came in at a very low price and enabled you to at least get goods going. So if you just owned a clothing shop and you wanted to get your goods out via e-channels, this was one way to do it. And so there's a number of things we've seen happen, whether it be customers providing sub payments, customers having to monitor and control quarantining within the country. We've had Dynamics 365 go in and manage all of that for us within Canada. And so I'm really excited to say that as much as when it comes to being able to help customers respond, recover, and reimagine what their businesses could look like in the future, we've been able to help them together with partners like Solgari and CRM Dynamics who've helped us put together a number of these solutions. So I hope that's given you a high level of what we have to offer and where this is going as a business. But I'll hand it over to Rick to take us forward with the panel.
Thank you, Desmond. And I think you're kind of being with Microsoft, you're a bit of in the right place at the right time, because I've been 20 years putting these solutions together for clients, and everybody always had a list of things to do. And the objective was, how do I get myself on that list? Well, last year, the list just went like this. We've got to do everything now. And, if we didn't have the cloud, there's no way we would have survived this technically. I mean, the change that has happened out there has been tremendous right across the board. So we're going to open up to our expert panel here. We're going to talk a little bit about, what happened last year, but mostly what are we doing going forward. So we've got an excellent group here, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And I'll start with the CRM Dynamics team. And Rob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Rick. So my name's Rob Triggs, and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for CRM Dynamics. And for those of you who don't know what that is, we are a gold certified partner that implements the Dynamics solution that we're talking about here today for Microsoft, mainly in Canada, but in many places across the globe.
Okay, great. Bill. Bill, you're on mute. I've known Bill a long time. I've never
there we go. Usually not lost for words. I'm a managing partner with CRM Dynamics, and I've been implementing CRM systems for about 25, 26 years now. So I really love the space.
Okay, over to you, Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So I'm Ed Grant. I'm COO at Solgari. We're a global Microsoft ISV premium tier Biz Apps Connect partner of Microsoft. And we work globally with partners in Canada. It's with CRM Dynamics to deliver integrated communication solutions as part of the Dynamics 365 solution. So glad to be here today.
Okay, and Vance, who's also on mute.
And there was me just laughing at Bill.
We've got together these technologists.
Good afternoon. Serves me right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Vance Harris is my name, and I'm the dirty old engineer at Solgari. Okay,
great. Let's start with you, Ed, because last year I was sitting in your office, but in January thinking, oh, it's great to be here in Dublin. I can't wait to get back. And then things changed rather quickly. So, and when things were changing, I was thinking, wow, this Solgari company, they've got a tool set that is going to go through the roof. So why don't we talk a little bit about 2020 for Solgari, and what were people looking for, and how did you help them?
Yes, it's true, Rick. We had a tremendous year, and working closely with Microsoft and with partners like CRM Dynamics, we were able to solve some massive problems that customers ran into. So, for example, we would have particularly in financial services and utilities, we ran into a number of situations where companies were sitting on-premise technologies, and suddenly they have staff that can only be at home, and how do they run their business, and how can they stand up solutions rapidly to continue customer service or sales or marketing or whatever they need to run their business on the customer service side. And solutions like ours, so in terms of handling customer interaction across all communication channels, sitting on top of Dynamics, or even standalone to start with, and then going on to Dynamics later, we had lots of those situations in financial services in particular, I mentioned. And in that particular area as well as how do they do it compliantly? So they suddenly have to move from all that on-premise technology to working remotely from home. So firstly, they need the flexibility. They also need compliance. And of course, the cloud can do that. And we had multiple examples of being able to stand up solutions within inside days, and covering areas such as sales, marketing, outbound sales, customer service. Our application on top of Dynamics 365 did all that for those type of companies. Utility space is all about maintaining customer contact, so outbound marketing campaigns, etc. Also, then going back to Desmond's point about respond, recover, reimagine, and you saw Satya Nadella's quote about the acceleration in digital transformation. I can give you some unbelievable examples. So in public sector, in healthcare, the need to respond to the COVID-19 crisis, and we worked with Microsoft on a situation in Europe with a major public sector healthcare provider that needed to have a COVID-19 solution in place within 10 days. 1,000 agents, integrated communications with Dynamics, two-way SMS, voice, and because the cloud is so flexible and our solutions can go up so quickly, there's no software or hardware involved. You just log in, you're live. We were able to do that in 10 days. So you think about that, a public sector company standing that up so quickly, that's digital transformation on speed. And as Desmond said, it's the end game is reimagination, but those customers that we worked with last year are already there. And next going forward is, how do we make this better? What else can we do with our business to improve it? Process automation, sales automation, all these things are now in play going forward.
If we look back even a decade, for what Solgari can do and the speed they can do it, this is what I was always impressed with, how quickly you could, a company that had an on-premise PBX and, a phone system and everything else were in trouble all of a sudden. And, because you're leveraging the Microsoft cloud, you're leveraging your own cloud, how quickly you can move somebody's communications and get them back up and running. Very impressive. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So Vance, being the technologist side of this from Solgari, talk a little bit about, last year, what were your customers consuming from a technology perspective, and where do you see that changing going forward, or kind of what surprised you at what they were consuming?
Sorry, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I think sometimes it's worth considering the audience also. I mean, if you take Solgari's position in the world in general, sure, we could engage with the company and put their communications, and we're talking about all their communications, every single thing that they need to talk to somebody about or communicate with somebody about, whether it be a file or a call or an SMS or an IM, or it doesn't matter what it is. You could languidly rattle along with them and make sure that they understood what we were offering and put it all together. And then, of course, when the situation arrived as it did back in March, all of a sudden, no one had a choice. And I think there is this important sort of step change. There was, yeah, sure, we'd really like to do that and get rid of the on-prem stuff, because every time something goes wrong, it's 5,000 quid for a card, and so on and so forth. So to this massive change where everyone said, Jesus, we need it yesterday. And I think you can split the world very much into three parts. There's the guys that just got caught with their pants down. They were wandering along, oh God, what are we going to do? And on the other side of the coin, you've got completely greenfield guys who say, it's just about to start a business. What am I going to do? At least do I put it off for a year, or is there something we can do to get my business running in such a way that I don't need to send everybody into the office? etc., etc. And then in the middle, you've got the guys that kind of, I guess you could split them into two also. The guys that had the vision and said, my God, you know, aren't I glad I thought about all of this and I've got everything in place and we were waiting for this to happen. I'd say that's a very thin slice of the pie, by the way. And then there's the guys that had BCP and DR and their business continuity plan and their disaster recovery was just morphed a little bit and massaged in such a way that they were able to actually generate at least some form of continuity. So along comes Solgari sitting there, and not that certainly some of the business that we've done, we're not in the business of sort of smiling at it at all, because it's quite serious. But the fact of the matter is we were sitting there with this beautiful tool set that people could just grab a hold of and have their business up and running, whether you got caught with your pants down, whether you, even if you had vision, you still need to really develop the full picture. And if you're a greenfield site, we can make you run your business today as opposed to waiting a year while it all sort of sorts itself out. So I think I think the difference, to answer your question, sorry, Rick, is very much the case that before we would have big long conversations, but they still get there in the end. Whereas you know, this other half of the year, or 3/4 of the year, it was very much a case of how quickly can we get this done? And they were surprised to learn that it could be a week.
Yeah. My second question for you is, how many quids in a loonie?
There is a pony of quids in a loonie, and there's 3 of those.
All right, let me write that down because I'm trying to figure that out now. Okay, thank you, Vance. So, you know, Solgari's there. They've got this great technology in the cloud. Desmond's over here with Microsoft helping everybody. Now we've got a partner like CRM Dynamics. Really different business, because for those who don't know, the partners are actually the ones who have to do the hard work here, right? Because they've got to deliver the solution to the field and, you know, take out what was old and put what's new in and get it up and running. So when this went down, the pandemic, I'm talking to partners who are in complete panic mode. My business is gone. We're going to be gone soon and whatever. Within 30 days, they can't keep up, right? So it just sort of hit hard, and everybody was sitting there going, we've got to, you know, move quickly on this digital transformation. So over to you first, Rob. Let's talk a little bit about CRM Dynamics, and as a partner business, how did it change last year? And how did you service your customers differently with all this going on?
That's a really good question. But I might start with a trivia question, just from the few I'm on mute comments. What's the #1 phrase used in 2020? Is it Donald Trump? Is it COVID? Or is it, hey, you're on mute? It's you're on mute. It's the #1 phrase used last year. Did you know that? But in all seriousness, for us, it was all about helping customers with business process continuity. So one day you're in the office and your call center works just fine. You've spent a lot of money on call center and phones and desks and all that. And the next day, all of those people are not in their chairs, they're at home. And what do you do? And then your sales team, they're not in the office anymore and you can't tell what they're doing. They're at home, sitting at their desk. Hopefully they're working. As a sales manager myself, right? Hopefully they're working. And so it was all about, how do you now take this remote or this virtual workforce, whether they be answering calls for customer service, they be doing sales calls, even the marketing teams, how do you give them the tools so that they can do their job virtually? And as a manager or a leader of the business, how do you know what your team is doing? And not as a big brother thing, but as, how do you know what they're doing? How do you know if what they're doing is working? Do you want to wait 3 months, a whole quarter to find out how well they did? Or do you need some KPIs to measure things like that? So we found ourselves helping customers with business process continuity and rapidly setting up Dynamics, which is what we do every day, to help them do that. And that's why our partnership with Solgari just came into laser focus, that holy smokes, like we've got this partnership with Solgari, and what their solution does is it helps you communicate with your potential or existing customers in pretty much any way they want to communicate with you, not just by phone. So we rapidly move forward, getting the message out that we had this relationship from this amazing company in Ireland that has this wonderful solution that bolts onto Dynamics. Let's get the message out. And that's what we did. And we have some customers rapidly deploying it right now, which is really exciting.
Okay, great. Over to you, Bill. So everything happened quickly in 2020, trying to move things forward. And you're one of the principals at CRM Dynamics. How do you see going forward 2021? How are you going to service your customers differently, especially in the space around sort of dynamics and products like Solgari?
Well, that's a good question. And if you look at what Solgari is, it's a telephony system, but it also provides communication with SMS, IVR. You've got the Dynamics capability of email. And when COVID happened, we found it wasn't 2 months; it was in 1 day. Everybody's at home, and the Solgari solution allowed us to help get people up and running very quickly with all of that telephony communications type functionality. But this year, it's really more than that. So in CRM, we'd already been with contact centers developing, models. So if customer A calls in, you'd treat them this way, and if customer B calls in, you'd treat them that way. So what I think you'll be seeing is the capabilities that we gave contact centers in the past for dealing with customers and increasing customer sat, reducing churn, increasing business, cross-sell, upsell, will start being pushed out to customers themselves. We've had customers where, they're calling in half of the cases. The one customer I'm thinking of, they were ordering 1 or 2 SKUs all the time. Well, why not just push that out to an SMS so they could say, need more water? And then, a delivery person could be on the road and you don't have to stay on call with a call center or on the phone with a call center for half an hour to get to reorder that water. For ones that are more complex, they'll likely be doing orders through, a portal or maybe something in an IVR. So what Solgari allows is for us to take contact center functionality and marry it to what we've been doing in CRM. So you've got one system without having to integrate all over the place. So that really reduces cost. The other thing we're seeing, and Desmond mentioned it, is these virtual agents. So instead of people having to go in and find the right help information on a website or wait and speak to somebody in the call center when the call center is open, they could actually go into a chat and say, I'm looking for this. So I might be looking to book an appointment with a wealth advisor, at a bank. And then the system could just book it for you so that you don't have to go into the branch or get somebody on the phone to book it. So we're taking the tools that somebody in a contact center would have been using anyways and just extending it out to customers. And I think, to shorten it, I think what you're going to be seeing is the capabilities that contact centers have will be pushed out to customers where possible. They'll be based on who the customers are. And you'll see for companies that do that, customer sat should go up and the actual cost of servicing the customers should go down. So it's really exciting for us anyways, looking into 2021 and beyond.
Okay. Desmond, I'm going to ask you a similar question. What did we learn in 2020 around dynamics and our business applications, I guess we can say? Where do you see the customers trending in 2021? How are they going to consume these products differently, more of, or anything else you'd like to sort of add to that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rick. And I think one of the things we've started to see is I mean, on top of everything I've spoken about, is customers looking at making it real for the use case they have very quickly. And so let me extrapolate that a little bit. There's this concept of low code, no code, and I think we talk about it broadly as power apps or power platform. And we've seen customers who've had use cases that are very unique to them. And so one of them I mentioned earlier on is this concept of quarantining. You come into the country and someone needs to take a note of the fact that you've arrived in the country and they need to put you into a quarantine period. and a case record has to be created. It has to be done in CRM, and it has to then ensure that someone follows up with you uniquely. We have not built into customer engagement technology an app called quarantining, right? And so if you needed to do that, you'd have to go out and get a ton of developers, et cetera, et cetera. And so with Power Apps, this government department essentially created this within the space of a few days. They have a little app that sits on a mobile phone or a laptop or anything, and you take note of the individual coming into the country. It creates a case or CRM record in customer engagement, and it allows them to do it. And so we've seen a lot of that. In fact, Power Apps as a group within the business application space in Dynamics has just exploded phenomenally in terms of the use cases and scenarios we've had. I'll quote an example with ESDC, who's a pretty well-known organization in Canada, Employment Social Development Canada, who had the app ready to go out the door within a matter of 2 weeks to allow Canadians to apply for grants. And so that was a Power App. And so that's where I'm starting to see a lot of the scaling out based on individual custom use cases happen in the biz app space. Now, on top of that, I think His Excellency spoke about public sector. You know, we're seeing tremendous acceleration in public sector. You know, CRM Dynamics has got a number of case studies around 311 use cases with customers. So those are the two things I'm seeing. And to add to the conversation, my final point is customer service is becoming key. And I mentioned it in some of the discussion. And so it's really important that we can make it as real as possible through technology that introduces video and voice. And so from that perspective, I think allowing the CRM technology to expand and have those capabilities with technologies like Solgari is going to help customers move even further.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when we look at, you know, what does IT do in a company now that we have the cloud? Because for years they really managed infrastructure, but we're seeing with applications like, you know, Power Apps, a lot of the IT infrastructure is now building out applications, right? Finding out what the end user customer needs, and what used to be like a government project to put a form together could be 6 months, right? And this thing is put together and out the door in 2 weeks. It's absolutely fabulous. So we're going to tie things together here, and I wanted to go back to Dr. McKee now because you know, you work in an international space, so you know there's no borders for technology, right? So how important is it for companies from Ireland like Solgari to really develop an international footprint?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Before I address that, I think one of the themes that's really important that has come out of this conversation is resilience. Because if you go back to March, when we were in Ireland, COVID hit. What did we have? We had people going into supermarkets and stripping the shelves. Now, so a lot of it was toilet roll, which to me was just a weird Freudian response to the whole thing. But in fact, you had people genuinely thinking that, oh my God, I'm not going to get pasta imported, or there's going to be breaks in the supply chain, or I can't get PPE. Now, there were some problems around PPE at the beginning. But the one thing I think that was demonstrated is that far from being the modern world we live in, far from it being a fragile system because of its complexity, COVID has actually proven that the supply chain system, because of digital technology, has been incredibly robust. You know, there are no shortages. You know, people are actually coming up to about a year still living. We still have fuel, we still have food, we still have jobs because of, again, all digital technology. And so the resilience has really proven itself. Unless a hostile government is hacking in to damage the system, it actually has been proven incredibly resilient. And I think that's really reassuring, because there was always that question, you know, if we've built, you know, just-in-time supplies and all of that kind of thing, and we've got products coming from all over the world because of global supply chains, are we uniquely vulnerable? I think COVID has shown, actually, no, we're incredibly resilient. And I think that's really important. And the conversation today is fascinating because it's going to stay resilient when companies are cooperating with each other. And you know, as per the conversation today, how quickly you can, as Vance was saying, how quickly you can solve problems for companies. And if you step sideways, for example, into Brexit, we've had problems with supply chains as of December because of Brexit. This is nothing to do with technology. This is, in my view, political stupidity, but they've done it, and there we go. So I think that's a really important point. That's very reassuring for Ireland, because Ireland is one of the most globally open economies in the world. We have Amazon, Facebook, PayPal, Google, you name it. They have corporations there, Intel, Microsoft. We have got them in there. We've got the biggest pharmaceutical companies in there too. We are really integrated into global supply chains. I think that the challenge for us is to develop our indigenous sector, and that's where there's a huge, big effort going in there. And it's great for us to see the spillover from the giant tech companies into the indigenous sector, because again, this is a big change. When we started bringing in FDI, basically from the 1960s and 70s onwards, we were doing screwdriver stuff and all of that. Big enough companies, but it meant that the Irish companies could not scale up to supply them. Solgari is interesting because in a digital world, you don't need to scale up. If you've got the product, you can go anywhere with that product, anywhere in the world. And I think this is the future. It's about services, it's about digital technology, it's about creativity, it's about being able to anticipate what the future is and what your customer needs are. And those customers could be anything. And we've seen, looking at it from a government perspective, we now need to be able to do big operations. The big operation now, which is going to be a really critical one, is can we get a whole nation vaccinated, and get it done in a way that respects people's privacy. Because, one of the big arguments in favor of bringing in 365 into our department was we did it in a way that was GDPR compliant. And we've said to people, you can't be keeping people's contact names on pieces of paper lying around the place. You can only now keep our contacts on 365 because we've done it in a way that is GDPR compliant. That's really important. And I'll finish on a story which I think kind of illustrates this. I was ambassador in Korea, and I was accredited to North Korea. And I was talking to an official, a World Health Organization official there, who said he was fascinated by the North Koreans because they had to do, I think it was a measles vaccination for the North Koreans. And he said it's going to take us, 6 months to a year to get the population vaccinated. And the North Korean official said, no, we'll get that done in a month. He says, impossible. Says, no. So every town has a square with numbers on it, and everybody knows their number, and they all turn up when they're told to in the local town or village square. They're all vaccinated, and away you go. And he said it was absolutely amazing. But of course, nobody wants to live in North Korea. What we want to do is use digital technology that can be as effective, but still preserve the unique values that we have, freedom and creativity and individualism. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating discussion, very reassuring that all of these smart technical people solving our day-to-day problems, even in a pandemic. So thanks for allowing me to be part of it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's been a very good panel. Is there anybody who has a closing remark or thought they'd like to add?
I just wonder what His Excellency might think about us trying that North Korea trick here in Ireland.
Let's go down
to work, sir, right?
I don't think it'll work much in Canada either.
Well, I could tell you, knowing the Irish, it would turn into a national party. Yeah. You put some Irish people together, somebody's going to roll out a keg of Guinness. And
that's what I was going to say. Just tell them to get a pint of Guinness after their shot. They'll be there.
Be good. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions that came in from the audience at all that we need to get to?
I don't see any that have come in just yet.
We covered the Quid Looney thing. That was one with definitely. Yeah.
I'll add a quick comment before we break. Is for those of you who are sitting there thinking about your own company and thinking about their similarities in the stories that we talked about today and want to see if there's an opportunity that we might be able to help you, there's a couple of email addresses there on the screen. Just feel free to reach out via those email addresses. Let us know who you are, and we'll be able to help you see if we can help.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And there will be a recording available for this, and you should be able to pick that up on social media or from CRM Dynamics if you want to share it with anybody else in your organization. So again, thanks for your time today, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.